My mom, who worked as a nurse as I was growing up and throughout most of my life, she would come home from the hospital and she would bring comic books. And she gave me one time a copy of a Popeye comic book. And part of it, he's got these huge forearms, you know. And I looked at it, and for some reason in my head, I remember thinking to myself, that's not how an arm really looks. You know, like my dad's arm doesn't look that way, and my arm doesn't look that way. So I decided I wanted to try and draw an arm that looked like a real arm versus a Popeye arm. And that was kind of what got me going on the whole route of wanting to draw. Because once I started doing that, I realized how much I liked it. It was fun to take up a pencil and a piece of paper and to make marks on it and have the marks kind of make sense. And I could make the marks look like something. I've always loved Captain America. I liked Batman, but I wasn't so much in love with the character as I was in love with the artist that drew Batman. I've always loved Superman. Um, I liked the cartoon character Space Ghost. I was very, very in love with that character. So characters like that, powerful, a lot of action, a lot of adventure, a lot of striving against great evils and finding a way to win the day despite all these overwhelming odds. During most of the '80s, uh, and at the time this was the case back then, there was only a few choice comic book conventions that happened around the country. And Chicago happened to be one of the few cities in the country at the time that had a major comic book convention that happened every summer. And I learned that being a comic book convention, that comic book companies would send representatives to the conventions, some of which would be actual editors of the comic books that would set aside time in the conventions to look at new people's artwork. You literally a portfolio review. So people like myself would show up with a handful of pages or a portfolio of work and show it to these editors saying, I would like to get a job and here's my work. And then the editor would go over it and look at it and consider it and talk to you about it and would let you know if you're ready or if you're not ready. And if you're not ready, they would tell you what you needed to work on to get ready, how to get better. So I went through that process, oh gosh, for quite a few years. And I was rejected quite a few times. I decided, okay, well then I'm going to need to get better and show up the next year. So I would create more samples. I would create more pages of artwork. And I would keep showing up at these portfolio reviews with these editors. And I would keep showing my work, and they would keep rejecting me because I wasn't good enough yet. Until finally, it got to the point where I would show up often enough, or so often, that the editors would get to recognize me. And they would say, oh, hey, Scott, how you doing? And, all right, great, let's see your new stuff. And so I would lay it out. And eventually, I got to the point where my work was good enough. The editor said, yeah, this is great, but I already have enough artists to do Batman. What else do you have? What other kind of characters can you show me you can draw? So I had heard that DC Comics, which owned the rights to the Looney Tunes characters, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and all that, they were looking for artists to draw those characters because they had a new line of Looney Tunes comic books they were going to do. I said, well, I have these sketches for the Looney Tunes, Tiny Toons. And he said, oh, you need to go talk to that person. So the editor caught my eye, waved me over, and I showed this editor just these loose sketches in my sketchbook of Bugs and Elmer Fudd and all this. And she looked at it and she says, okay, great, you're hired. I mean, it literally happened that fast. And I got back home from that convention that weekend, and a couple of days later, I received a fax with my first story, which was of the Tiny Toons characters related to Looney Tunes. And I started drawing comic books from there. I'm all for supporting anybody's efforts to want to do comics and to want to learn and to get better at doing them. The exact route they take, it really is. It really depends on that particular person's makeup as a person, what they're like, what their likes and dislikes are in life. For me, I really didn't have much choice if I wanted to get a greater education in art beyond what I could do in high school. Kendall at the time was the only real viable choice I had. In Kendall, I took figure drawing, human anatomy. I took every class they offered, even if I didn't have to take them. I still took them. So human anatomy was huge. It was huge, and for me, for whatever reason, I would ace every class. I mean, I just simply had a tendency to know and understand the human anatomy, and I just got better and better as I went. But there's also, learning color, learning how to paint, learning how to use ink pens, learning how to draw architecture, buildings and such, and learning how to use different tools, the ink pen, the brush, for inking and painting, and all of these skills come into play to do comic books. So I wasn't learning comic books per se in Kendall, but I was learning and getting good at the skills and the talents, or the skills and abilities that one has to have in order to do good comic books. 3 years I was there, it gave me the concentrated time to focus on just those skills. And it gave me an incredible amount of practice time and exposure to other skills and other resources and inspirations of art that just completely just filled me up with both inspiration and instruction, and it just made me a better and better artist as I went. The one skill that I think anybody has to have that will determine their status or their ability as an artist is, can you stick with it? Can you really show and prove to yourself that you have what it takes to stay an artist and to constantly work at it and to not give up no matter how many obstacles or problems get thrown in your way? And how devoted are you to being an artist and remaining an artist? For me, I guess I'm fortunate. I never had a question about that. When I was 4 years old and I realized I loved drawing, that sensation stayed with me my entire life. It never wavered. Nobody ever was able to make me quit doing art, and I've had some efforts in my life along the way where, it's been tried to get squashed, but I never give up. Every day, I come down to the studio or wherever my studio has been over the years in different places and situations, and I devote time to be in the studio to work on something, whether it's a finished piece of artwork like this, or whether it's having to organize a project or spend time trying to find work for me to do that pays money, or whether it's maybe going over some of the artwork I've done before and maybe devote a little time to thinking, well, can I do this any better, or is it really finished? Can I completely put it away? And sometimes it's devoted to just imagining and letting my mind just explore endlessly and just come up with ideas and explore my skills and talents. Sometimes I'll come down, I'll go to the studio, or even if I'm not in my studio, sometimes I'll devote some time during the day to practice, to literally just scribble and sketch. Even though I've been doing this now. I've been a professional artist since 1978, a year before I graduated Kendall. So I've been doing this since 1978 professionally. And I've been doing art generally all my whole life since I was 4. So you'd think at this stage of my life, after all these decades, that I wouldn't need to practice, or you'd think I'd gotten good enough. Well, I don't look at it that way. I look at the fact that, one, I still have fun drawing. I no matter how many years I've been doing it, I absolutely love to pick up a pencil and paper and just start making these marks.